what it means to me is actually artwork that expresses crypto's ideals, the ideals of decentralization, sovereignty, taking that power into your own hands to be able to transact with who you want, when you want, for what you want. I think crypto art is basically the art version of what crypto means to money.
Lucho Poletti is a prominent crypto artist whose work highlights the transformative power of Bitcoin. He shares this message through both physical and digital mediums, creating propaganda and pop art imagery, animations about Bitcoin culture, and artwork laced with crypto iconography that challenges the traditional financial system. Let's dive into this conversation.
Lucho, what does crypto art mean to you?
Oh, that's a big one. So for me, crypto art, it can be many things. What it means to me is actually artwork that expresses crypto's ideals, the ideals of decentralization, sovereignty, taking that power into your own hands to be able to transact with who you want, when you want, for what you want. And I think that there's a lot of interesting parallels between crypto itself, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other decentralized cryptos, using them in lieu of the fiat money system and using them to store your value and all that. There's a lot of parallels between that and crypto art in regards to crypto art versus the traditional art market, where artists no longer have to rely on art institutions. They can go directly to their collectors. They can actually build those relationships one-on-one with each and every one of their collectors. It's a worldwide market that never closes down. I think crypto art is basically the art version of what crypto means to money.
And Lucho, you have said that Bitcoin freed you from an uninspiring career. How has Bitcoin impacted your ability to pursue your work as a crypto artist?
Okay, so I'm a Miami boy, born to two immigrant parents, my mother from Cuba, my father from Argentina. And growing up, when I started drawing, my parents noticed that I had some kind of talent. So they sent me to art classes. I learned how to paint. I learned how to sketch with charcoals and pencils. And that was my dream as a child. And eventually, when I got into college, I considered pursuing art, and everyone around me, including my parents, my best friends, and anyone who really had a lot of influence in my life, kind of detracted from that and told me I should pursue something more realistic. So I went to business school, and eventually I got my master's in finance, and I started applying to investment banks. And then I started to really wake up. It was just after the 2008 global financial crisis, which was really scary and was like the moment where I started asking the big questions about what are these governments doing with the money? Why are they all in debt? Who's in control of it all? And how could something like this happen? Because these investment bankers were dumping all those repackaged subprime loans on retail investors and labeling them as AAA rated securities that impacted my family. I mean, I'll go into a little bit personal, but my father passed when I was a young child, and my mother was left with some money to take care of us. And a lot of that money was in things like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So when that happened, it impacted us a lot. And we had to move to a different house, start living a little bit more humbly. And I think that was the event that really played a role in why I chose finance, because I said, oh, I feel powerless to do anything about this. I need to understand it better. Maybe this will protect me in the future, or I'll be able to navigate whatever crisis comes in the future. So eventually I started my career, and after having an opportunity to move to New Jersey and work for Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, I rejected it, and I said, you know what? I can take my skills and I can work for a business that's more normal, that doesn't have anything to do with the banking system. Miami has some of the biggest liquor companies in the world. So I found a job with Pernod Ricard, and I was running financial models for them and doing analysis and helping them sell their products better. I put a lot of my energy into the work that I was doing there. And eventually I just realized alcohol is fun and it has its place in this world. But it wasn't fulfilling from the standpoint of someone who is basically wired to create and share things with the world. So eventually I decided, you know what? I'm in my 20s. I can do whatever I want. So I dumped the career and I said, I need to get out of my comfort zone. I moved out of Florida. I moved to Austin, Texas, where I thought was a good place for art and culture. And I started creating digital art. I was creating art about things that I didn't like about what I saw with the government, even pieces back then that were focused on the Federal Reserve and money printing and the banks, a lot of politically fueled things. I was criticizing things that I saw in culture, propaganda, messaging from big companies and institutions that made people want to make decisions in their life that were not in their best interest. And that's when Bitcoin really came on my radar. And when I realized what Bitcoin was, what it meant, how it was actually a decentralized money system, how the monetary policy and is hard coded. It's something that you can trust. It's something that is actually doing the opposite of what the fiat system is doing. And there's less and less Bitcoin being emitted over time, being mined and created. So I jumped in with both feet. I started just smashing buy on Bitcoin. Half of each paycheck went directly into Bitcoin. That was around 2017. So the bull market empowered me to take that leap into art. And it made me feel alive, to be honest with you. It made me feel like the inner child in me was coming back to life. So coming back to the Bitcoin thing, as I feel that the money system is the root of so many problems that we see in the world, I do see Bitcoin as a potential solution to a lot of that. I realize that if I start to make art that criticizes the money system that I feel is such a bad force in this world, and it elevates the new money system that I think can really help fix those problems, it just really clicked for me. And I went full time into creating crypto art. It's been a wild ride. I'll say that. It's been quite a ride.
This is certainly something that's personal for you. And thank you for sharing some of your own background and some painful experiences, as you mentioned, with your father passing and then dealing with some of the financial challenges associated with part of what your art now wants to move us past as a society. I'd like to wade into some of that art related section. Much of your early artwork is propaganda style posters for Bitcoin, like your well known Dr. Satoshi's Orange Pill. What was your interest in exploring this genre of crypto advertising?
It's my love for propaganda posters, really. I would say that I'm not your typical art school educated artist who is well versed in art history and really looks at art from the lens of what a lot of other artists might see. And what I know for me is World War II propaganda posters, things like these French advertising posters, these vintage advertising posters, the combination between words and images has always grabbed me. Anyone who comes across a poster that advertises something or pushes some idea, they know exactly what it's telling them. It jumps out at them and it really grabs them. And I always was fascinated by that. The bold statements, the bright colors, like one big iconic image or composition that really accompanies it and sort of reinforces that message. And one artist in particular who I say I've taken a lot of influence from is Shepard Fairey, who is responsible for the Obama Hope poster and the Obey street art and all that. I read all his books. I really found interesting how he saw what he did as this almost experiment in phenomenology, where even if you have an image that's entirely meaningless and you put it around enough and enough people see it and it's repeated enough times, it becomes a phenomenon and people begin attributing their own meaning to it. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. I think I'm going to do something like that for Bitcoin. So in terms of like visual style, I would say that I've taken influence from so many different artists and things that I've seen. I'm a huge film fan. I really dabbled in from the propaganda poster style to this sort of Boschian, hyper detailed, complex animated compositions. But the core of how I started creating art in the first place. And most of my track record in creating art has involved these propaganda style images, specifically designed to get people to question what money is, how the money system works, to really critique it and put the flaws in people's faces with words and images, and then present Bitcoin as the alternative. So, for my mission as a Bitcoin focused artist, that propaganda style, it's really at the core of what I do. And I think that I will always use it one way or another in all my art.
It's highly effective imagery, and it boils down some of the key benefits and strengths of Bitcoin better than much other messaging or articles that exists out there. In a similar vein, you have a lot of artworks that feature key moments from crypto history, like the Bitcoin time traveler. Why is it important for you to commemorate crypto culture through your art?
That's a good question. The Bitcoin time traveler, it was a specifically impactful post for me. You probably read the original Reddit post. I'm this sort of person who reads something and my mind just fills with all these images. And when I read it, it really grabbed me and I said, wow, this is pretty dark. The thing about the Bitcoin time traveler post was that it did create this dystopian, like, oh, wow, Bitcoin, if it gets out of control, the complete failure of the entire money system, will it become this thing of haves and have nots? But it made people who read it consider, like, wow, Bitcoin could be the main thing in the future. My first project with it was a piece that I released on Super Rare. A Better Future was the title of it. And the first illustration I did of it, I titled it Satoshi Citadel, because part of the time traveler story was that all the Bitcoiners had created their citadels to keep them safe from the dangerous world outside, and they all had to pay the entry fee with Bitcoin. It was sort of like this society inside these protected castles. And I thought, you know what? This vision of the future, it's interesting, it's engaging for me, but let me try to envision a better future. So that's where the title of that piece came from. And it was sort of Satoshi Citadel, just kind of a Satoshi with his hands out, presenting a future that was peaceful and advanced technologically and clear blue skies and a nice citadel just reaching into the heavens. And that, I think, was a way for me to transform that dark, gloomy story into something that is a bit more positive, because I do see the most likely outcome to be much more positive than the original time traveler post.
A future to look forward to, hopefully. Lucho, many of your works feature figures like Satoshi behind a Guy Fawkes mask. What is your interest in exploring themes of anonymity and privacy in your artwork?
I would say that I don't focus that much on anonymity or privacy with my art. It's more about the money and the revolution against the banks. It's something that a lot of people ask me about, because the connection between the mask and anonymity is obviously a very clear one, right? So it's the V for Vendetta mask. It's an image that the anonymous hacker group uses. And the backstory behind it is that as I was beginning to make my Bitcoin poster designs, I was looking for an iconic image to be able to sort of use like as a vessel to represent Bitcoin as a movement, and to also represent Satoshi as the anonymous creator that no one can really put a face to him. So when I thought, okay, I need to create an image that represents the Bitcoin movement and also I can use to sort of portray the creator, I thought, well, he's anonymous. So let me do something with this mask, redesign it, and sort of use it to not only portray the idea of Satoshi, but also to portray anyone who has contributed to Bitcoin's development and to its success in terms of adoption.
And something else that comes up in your work quite often is cypherpunk imagery. What can you tell us about who cypherpunks are and what is the influence on the crypto art movement?
So the cypherpunks are the people who are responsible for all of this, right? They were creating privacy oriented technologies to try to create freedom in the age of the internet. And obviously, the Cypherpunk mailing list, all the cypherpunks that were involved in the early days of that movement engaged with Bitcoin as Satoshi started posting about it. And even many of them referenced Hal Finney, David Cham, and Nick Szabo, and Wei Dai, and all these cypherpunks who basically created all the individual pieces of privacy technology, cryptography, that made Bitcoin's development possible.
Let's turn to the exciting news from this week. You released the series Bank Runners, an edition of 1,776 unique works that has already sold out. Congratulations. What can you tell us about these works and the series?
So Bank Runners, it's something that I've had a long time in the works. It basically all stems from this visual concept that I developed back in 2019, pretty early in my poster days. And the idea is to create this visual representation of this revolutionary spirit, this defiant energy of taking your power from the banks, taking your economic energy out of that system and putting it in a system that is more created for the people, by the people. So the first image that I created was this bank runner poster back in 2019, where it was just this character that's running on top of the Bank for International Settlements, which is known as the central bank of central banks. So I chose that image because I thought if I need to create the end final boss for like representation, if it's not the Fed, it's probably got to be this one. So I used that and I later animated it where you have this character that sort of picks up a bag of cash, throws it in a dumpster, grabs a Bitcoin, and just like runs on top of that bank. And I started thinking to myself, I really like that idea. A lot of times I start to revisit some of the ideas that I've done in the past. And I say to myself, well, if I were to do this today, how would I do it differently? I could probably take this idea a lot further. So I started developing the banknote design for bank runners. And I realized that I could do a lot with it. I could use many different characters. I could maybe put those characters in different contexts or put them riding animals like the bulls and the bears to represent the animalistic forces in the market, the rocket characters and all that. So Bank Runners has the same purpose as the original idea, but it does take it further. And I think that eventually, when I got deep into the creative phase for it, I realized that it could serve as a wake up call for people in the space, for anyone who's looking at it, whether they are, as you would say, a normie, like an outsider, or someone who's already been onboarded into the crypto space, that they can see it and they can question, is this actually why we're here? It's not just about buying an asset and hoping that it goes up. It's a revolution. It's a rebellion. So that's the idea with bank runners. It should be about embodying that revolutionary spirit of breaking free from the system and embracing Bitcoin. And eventually the way that it shaped up was that I used a lot of different characters to represent the creation of Bitcoin, the people who took Bitcoin from its infancy and really pushed it forward, and then a lot of the people who are still pushing that revolution forward today. And the final set, 1776 banknotes, that is obviously a nod to the revolt and the US Declaration of Independence. And for me, I do see the full set as a sort of declaration of monetary independence, and whoever engages with it or grabs a piece from it, they're all putting their stamp of approval on that revolution.
You've stated that your goal for this series is to bring us back to the core values that unite us. Why is it important to remind people of what those values are?
In the current day, it's especially important. We're seeing a lot of custody-based solutions for Bitcoin and the ETFs. And I mean, to be frank with you, I've been a bit frustrated and disappointed in a lot of the narrative shift, especially in the Bitcoin space, where you see a lot of talk about speculating on MicroStrategy stock. And the ETF makes more sense for me because I can just keep it all in the same place. And it's always, for me, been not your keys, not your coins, self sovereignty. This is a peer to peer money system that enables anyone to participate, whether they have a brokerage account and can buy an ETF or not. Bitcoin wasn't created for that. Actually, Bitcoin was explicitly created to be a peer to peer money system that removes middlemen. It removes reliance on centralist institutions and authority. So I think that with bank runners, what we're doing is using these text themes that are very old and they're screaming at you that this is what Bitcoin's about. Like it's about providing you with sovereignty, freedom, the ability to transact with who you want when you want. It's not only an alternative to the banks, but it's almost like the opposite. So yeah, that's basically the idea.
You said that bank runners are a digital declaration of monetary independence. What kind of commentary do they provide about financial sovereignty?
If you go through the text themes, which there's like 28 of them in the set, they're based on Bitcoin being an independent money system, one that allows you to take control of your funds, your savings into your own hands and not need to trust banks. I think that the global public has trusted this banking system to manage the money supply of the world. And they've completely violated that trust. They have been completely irresponsible with the money supply. They've inflated each and every national currency to smithereens, and it's robbing people blind. So throughout the bank runner set, you can see a lot of messaging about the money being based on rules and not rulers, something that you hold and control, calls to action to unbank yourself and see it as freedom money that not only allows you to hold it and take ownership over it, but to also use it as you see fit. There's a lot of cases where people just spend their money on something and the bank says no. If you wanted to donate to WikiLeaks back in the day, the bank says no. They censor your transactions. The thing that happened in Canada with the truck drivers, they censored their transactions. When I was buying Bitcoin at one point, they censored my transactions. The fundamental of censorship resistance, it might not hit that much for people who've never experienced it, but it's a very real thing. I mean, they might tell you you can't spend your money. So that's a big piece of it, being able to do what you want with your money.
You observed on X, Lucho, that a lot of ETH accounts were proudly collecting your Bitcoin themed artworks while there was little attention from Bitcoin maxis. What do you make out of this?
It's an interesting line that I walk because the core of my, I guess you could say, fandom has always been Bitcoin maximalist because my art maximizes Bitcoin at the end of the day. I've never really considered myself to be a Bitcoin maximalist, but a lot of people are confused by that because they're like, this guy only makes art about Bitcoin. He's basically bringing Bitcoin messaging and art into Ethereum's turf. But the thing about the post is that the Bitcoin maximalists have celebrated my art for many years. These artworks are really no different in terms of how they look, the message they say in a broad sense. But the same people who have been very loudly supportive of my work, they realize that it's being sold in the digital art market, minted on the Ethereum chain, and they're not even celebrating at all. So when I saw all these accounts from the OGs, the artists, the collectors that I'm so familiar with, but then I see all these new names, new recruits that came and ran with us for the bank runners drop, and I'm seeing them all sharing the artwork on the timeline, and I'm thinking, how ironic is that? So the Ethereum focused accounts are celebrating Bitcoin art. And I didn't hear a peep out of a lot of the Bitcoin maximalist side of things. So yeah, I'm just basically calling out the tribalism. I think that in a sense, these are the ideals that unite us all. And they're the reasons that we're here in the first place, uniting people from other chains behind the idea that started it all, and just trying to wake up the Bitcoiners and say, hey, the Ethereum people are our allies. We're all working on building a decentralized future. And obviously, Ethereum is part of that. So yeah, I just called it out, a bit of a spicy tweet, I suppose, but it was worth saying for sure.
I think it was worth saying. It is one of those all roads lead to Rome kind of approaches. And I think you've identified that. And probably there are some folks who are happy to hear someone who's on the creative side be able to share a bit of that message as well. I'm curious, are there any particular artists or works of art that you view as an essential part of the story of crypto art?
Absolutely. I could start almost like in a timeline. The first crypto artist and first artworks I ever saw that were created for crypto was an artist that goes by the name Crypto Graffiti. He, I believe, got involved as soon as 2014. And I noticed some of his work. I saw it as I was learning about Bitcoin. I saw some bank logo redesigns that he did that were pretty clever. He did some works that were sort of like ripping up credit cards and recreating confused looks on Jamie Dimon's face, and these rebellious sort of anti-bank, pro-Bitcoin messaging. And I was inspired. Making art about Bitcoin is interesting to me because it's an activist sort of thing. So sort of like what I was doing before, but doing it with Bitcoin. So crypto graffiti popped up on my radar, and that almost was like the seed that was planted. Once I actually got involved, the first artist that popped up after crypto graffiti was Pascal Boyart. Pascal was doing murals, and he was putting his Bitcoin QR codes next to his P-Boy signatures on those murals. And it's an interesting thing to monetize your work when you're putting it on the street for people to enjoy. And he was being sent donations from Bitcoiners who were vibing with the message because they were very like anti-establishment. So he had started collecting donations with those, and I started following his work. Shortly after that, the other artists that I really not only noticed but vibed with their works were Coldy, Trevor Jones, Josie Bellini, X-Copy, Hackatow, all the early super rares. I would say that those are the artists who I've always looked up to, admired most, learned from the most. When we all jumped into the space, we felt united by a cause, and we were all creating not only crypto art, but art that was speaking to what crypto means and calling out the bullshit, people like Coldy, who has this really masterful collage style, very aligned with me, where we're both dunking on fiat with our artworks and putting a spotlight on a lot of the important people who have made this all possible. Josie Bellini is another great example. She has a vector style and came from a propaganda background with her art, and super aligned and the message, the mission that we all share. And some of the other ones that I just love because of the style and the way that they make me feel when I see the artworks, people like Max Osiris. He's been a controversial figure in the space, but I believe that he has a very important perspective on things. And when he gets really fired up about something, I know that it means something. People like Gary Cartledge, Troy Fitzpatrick, as he goes by the other handle. When I see his stuff pop up on my timeline, I always think, man, this guy, I love his style. And he's like the bullshit police in a way, where he just calls things out. He just lays out his views on what's going on in the space, what's going on in the world, like a very expressive, strong style. A lot of money might be the last one I need to mention. A lot of money, incredible, for his time in the space, just pumping out left and right. As I saw him produce and I saw all his work, and almost like the velocity of it and just how much of a machine he was to create these incredibly detailed and conceptually almost comical, but serious in a way. And the unique style, the unique mind of a lot of money is something I think probably will never be replicated. There's a reason that he's so highly esteemed and celebrated by all of us today. So yeah, I'll wrap it up with a lot of money.
Lucho, that was a thorough and thoughtful response. And it's always special to be able to listen to an artist talk about their peers who they've appreciated, learned from, worked alongside over the past many years. So thank you for walking us through that. I just wanted to say that you have long advocated for financial sovereignty, decentralization, and freedom from monetary debasement, and you use your crypto art to support these values. Thank you so much for joining us today to share your important story.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a review. And keep an eye out for the next episode of The Collector's Call.